Trump's political strength is with low information voters. By putting, at least for the time being, his critics on less visible platforms, it makes it even less likely that criticisms of Trump will penetrate to Trump voters.
Now, TV comedian and host of late night shows Jimmy Kimmel has been taken off air after comments he made after the shooting of Charlie Kirk. Now, Donald Trump praised the move, saying on board Air Force One that Kimmel's show's ratings were the real reason behind the cancellation.
He was fired, he had no talent. He's a whack job, but he had no talent, and more importantly than talent, he had no, because a lot of people have no talent, they get ratings. But he had no ratings. His ratings were worse than Colbert, I think.
So his ratings, and of course he's referring there to Stephen Colbert, who was also cancelled. His show's still on, but it will be not renewed at the end of the season. Well, joining us to discuss these numbers and how successful these shows are is Isabella Simonetti, media reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Isabella, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Isabella, how well are these shows doing? We keep hearing they don't do as well as the Ed Sullivan Show that used to get tens of millions of viewers, but television has changed since those days. From what I believe, someone like Stephen Colbert is getting, on average, every evening, we should say, about 2 million viewers. Is that successful in TV terms?
So the issue is more complicated than just ratings. First, Kimmel's show hasn't been outright canceled. It's indefinitely suspended, and there's a possibility it could come back on the air. But the late night TV landscape, as you mentioned, has been challenged for years because of changing viewership habits and other business challenges. Colbert's show, which you mentioned, which is the ratings leader in the 11:35 p.m. time slot, loses about $40 million per year and is going dark next May. That just gives you a sense of the business environment that we're operating in. With Kimmel, what happened with his show is a business decision, but politics certainly play a role as well.
When you say it's a business decision, can you elaborate on that? Why did they make that business decision, and why did they make it now?
From a business perspective, the late night landscape has changed over the last few years in the face of challenges like the decline in ad dollars going to traditional broadcast programming, along with cord cutting and younger audiences evolving viewer habits. But right now, there are extremely complex political dynamics at play that have certainly had an impact on ABC and Disney's decision making here.
So this, I think you're referring to the FCC, the political appointee at the FCC, who has the power to allow deals between broadcasters to happen, and also has the power of stopping those deals. Is this what has sort of come into play over the decision with Jimmy Kimmel?
Yeah, so just for some context, last week after Jimmy Kimmel criticized on his show how Trump and members of the Make America Great Again movement were responding to the shooting of Charlie Kirk, that prompted a lot of criticism from conservatives, including Brendan Carr, the FCC chairman. And days later, Nexstar and Sinclair, which own many local ABC stations, said they would indefinitely preempt the show. Mm-hmm. And Disney also decided to take Jimmy Kimmel off the air. So the point that I'm making here is that this is a polarizing political landscape that we're in, and that can certainly play a role in what's happening with his show.
Does it also have to do with the owners of ABC wishing to expand their operations and get a bigger share of those broadcasting stations across America, something that will need FCC approval? And if they don't get that, they're not going to be able to go ahead with their business deal.
Well, one thing I would say is it's been a very complicated saga that underscores the business and political dynamics that are at stake here. Nexstar, which I mentioned earlier, which is a broadcaster that owns and operates more than 200 local television stations, needs the FCC's sign-off on its $6.2 billion acquisition of Tegna, for example. At the same time, companies like Disney have been at battle with Trump over a number of different issues over the years. ABC last year agreed to pay $15 million to settle a defamation suit brought by Trump against the network and its star anchor, George Stephanopoulos. At the same time, Disney is facing a lot of backlash from political leaders. Obama, the former president, for example, said the Trump administration had embraced its own version of cancel culture. And that's just one of many examples.
And just briefly, before we go, Isabella, Donald Trump, I'm not going to play the clip now because we're tight for time, but he basically said on Air Force One that he says that figures have shown, the figures that he's seen, that 97% of the coverage he gets on these big broadcasters is negative. And he suggested, but this is the way Donald Trump suggests plenty of things, that perhaps some of these broadcasters will lose their license. How would that work? And can that happen in the US? Can licenses just be revoked from broadcasters?
It's hard to know what the limits are and where things will go from here. The FCC has certainly been more vocal and involved under Brendan Carr. But like I said, it's possible. I think what Disney does here will really set the tone going forward. It's been in talks with Jimmy Kimmel to try to find a path forward for his show, but we haven't reported any new developments on that front yet. So it's hard to know exactly where things will go.
Isabella, thank you for your time and your expertise. Isabella Simonetti, there, media reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Well, with us to discuss this debate around what's happening to free speech in the US is Mark Graber, Regents Professor at University of Maryland School of Law. Mark, thanks for giving us your time. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Mark, this cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel, I suppose we should be more accurate. It's not exactly a cancellation. It's a suspension of his show indefinitely. Has sparked quite a lot of debate. How do you see it?
Well, what is going on in the United States is not simply the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel, but the firing of various people who wrote private posts on the Kirk assassination. Is we're seeing a merger of the marketplace of ideas with the commercial marketplace. So free speech in the 18th century was the speech of independent, largely people with sustainable farms. They weren't employed by anyone. Now your employer exercises his or her free speech rights by simply saying anything you say that the employer doesn't like, you can lose your job. This may be protected by the First Amendment, but it is a threat to the system of freedom of expression as a whole.
Are you surprised that you haven't seen more challenges using the First Amendment with these cancellations? I mean, Stephen Colbert was the first to go. His show is not going to be renewed at the end of the season. Many people have said that this is because he was critical of Donald Trump. We've seen news organizations like Associated Press being excluded from the White House press pool because they refused to refer to the Gulf of America as the Gulf of Mexico. Are you surprised that there haven't been more challenges to the administration using that First Amendment to say, look, we have to be free to say what we want to say and to report on what we feel is the truth?
The problem is the First Amendment and constitutional rights work differently in the United States than they do in many other regimes. First, the First Amendment is only a right against government. If your employer fires you because of your private speech, there's no First Amendment right. Second, government is deemed to have speech rights of its own. So government can say, we're only going to give you certain government benefits, such as access for journalists, if you agree with us. So this is the reason why First Amendment claims about speech are often harder to make in the United States than they are in other regimes that recognize speech rights against private persons.
So from your point of view, as someone who studies these, do you feel that the right to free speech is under attack in the US, or is it, as you put it, the commercialization of speech that's happening?
I think it's a greater danger is the commercialization of speech and its effect on what we might call the system of free expression. Mm-hmm. That it may be that government is not directly restricting speech, But when government goes after a business because of its speech, when a business starts firing or suspending employees for fear those employees' speech may offend government, we have less a marketplace of ideas and more simply business. And the problem is when business dominates everything, who criticizes business?
Do you think that perhaps Donald Trump has made a misstep in his pursuit of the late night hosts? He's made no bones about it. He disliked Stephen Colbert along with Jimmy Kimmel. When Colbert lost his job, he said Jimmy Kimmel's next. This was months ago. Guess what? Jimmy Kimmel is next. He's set his sight on Seth Meyers, Jimmy Fallon. I'm sure there's going to be others there, but is he perhaps making a mistake in the sense that he can remove these people from the businesses that you're referring to, namely ABC and CBS before that, but he can't truly silence these people? And perhaps these people are going to move on to bigger, wider platforms. YouTube, social media, we've talked about on the show how powerful TikTok can be in spreading information. Is he risking that these people are now going to move to platforms that have got even a wider reach than your traditional broadcast media?
There is some risk, but Trump's political strength is with low information voters. By putting, at least for the time being, his critics on less visible platforms, it makes it even less likely that criticisms of Trump will penetrate to Trump voters.
But isn't he putting them on the same platforms that his voters love and use? Podcasts, social media, TikTok, YouTube's been a massive driver of Donald Trump's base. That's where all of a sudden these influencers who are now getting questions in the White House, he's kind of forcing the likes of Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon and all of those to enter truly that space and start competing with his base support.
But remember, on a great many of those platforms, people can choose who they choose to listen to.
Yeah.
So you can structure it so you only listen to people who agree with you. One of the features, say, of the major networks was there was a variety of views. As we move to TikTok, to X, people can create what some call the daily me. All the news I agree with. And when Jimmy Kimmel moves from national television to YouTube or whatever, his followers will continue to see him. Some of the curious will continue to see him, but low information voters will not.
Mark, thank you so much for giving us your time. Really fascinated to speak to you. Mark Graber there, a Regents Professor at University of Maryland School of Law.